This is Brent. Brent Howell Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash, the River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Oh, there I am. Okay, question number 115. Catechism of the Constitution of the United States by Arthur J. Stansbury. The Catechism. What is bankruptcy, it says. What is bankruptcy? Now, this is a question concerning our Constitution of the United States. Remember, only the federal courts have bankruptcy jurisdiction. The state governments and the state courts have no bankruptcy jurisdiction. Bankruptcy is a national government question. Only the national government has power to bankruptcy. Why? Well, because of interstate commerce. I mean, if the state of Ohio had the power to declare bankruptcy, all the debtors would go to the state of Ohio, in the state of Ohio, would go to the government, the courts there, and they would ask for bankruptcy for all their debts that they owed to people in other states. Every state would probably end up doing that sooner or later. There would be people in those states powerful enough to pull that off. So our Constitution of the United States says, well, yeah, the states are sovereign, but because we'd like to keep interstate commerce going, we're going to give the power of bankruptcy to the federal courts only. So if you go into bankruptcy, and for bankruptcy, you go into the federal courts, not the state courts. They'll just tell you, get out of here. We can't declare bankruptcy. What is bankruptcy? Let's talk about that in just a minute. Bankruptcy is the power to set aside obligations of contract. That's what bankruptcy is. Let's see what he says it is. When a man has no money or goods enough to pay his debts, he is bankrupt. That's our word for being unable to meet your obligations of debt. We also call it, at law, our courts call it insolvency. You're either solvent or you're insolvent. What is solvent? Solvent means, this is the definition in our common law tradition in America. Solvency means that you are able to pay your debts as they become due. You are able to pay your debts as they become due. You're not in arrears on your debts. If you're in arrears, that means you haven't paid your debts when they come due. You can't pay them. You are insolvent. And you have the option of going into a federal court called a bankruptcy court and ask the court for a decree of bankruptcy. That means he protects you from your debtors. The court protects you from your debtors. And being in the situation of being insolvent is to be in bankruptcy. The object of laws, says Stansbury, on this subject is to compel such a man to give up all that he has to the people that he owes, and to fix the terms on which he may be set free from the debts he cannot pay. It's called sometimes bankruptcy. The granting of bankruptcy is called bankruptcy protection. You're being protected from your creditors. Now, this is a big deal now. This is even a bigger deal back then, because back then there were what we called debtors' prisons. And if you didn't pay your debts and they found you, they could do a legal process on you and throw you in prison till you pay. Now, how exactly that's supposed to work, I don't know. I mean, if you're in prison, how are you going to pay your debts? How are you going to sell your property to liquidate and pay them? How are you going to earn more money to take care of your family and pay your debts? You aren't. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why prisons, the God's law, the Bible, our common law has always held that prisons are against the law. That's important to know. The Bible provides no provision in the law of God. It's a complete law, a perfect law, and there are no provisions there for prisons as penalty for crimes or wrongdoing or failure. No provision at all. Debtors' prisons were not prisons for crime. No, they're just prisons. It's awful. Debtors' prisons are not in America for an important reason now. Because, number one, our common law tradition, being a Christian tradition, does not recognize prisons. The Bible does not recognize prisons as punishment for crimes. And I hasten to add also, I'm a man that's been thrown into prison twice. I speak from experience. I've been in prison twice. Why? For being a lawyer and defending people in court, in federal court. Fascinating story. Of course, I fully intend to write it down in a book. And I've got a lot of that done, but we're working on that now. There's a lot to learn from it. But prisons are not part of our common law tradition. And not until the rise of Quakerism in America did we have any prisons. Two things our common law doesn't include. Number one, it doesn't include prisons as punishments for crime or wrongdoing, like not paying your debts. Our common law doesn't allow for that because it's part of a Christian tradition. Number two, our common law, even in America, didn't allow law enforcement officers to carry weapons. Now, isn't that something? And it wasn't that long ago. What I mean to say was that was true in America up until just before it started to change, before that awful war between the northern and the southern tiers of the states. But that idea hung on in America. That was our mindset, and it still is to a great degree. We don't trust government with guns. We don't trust government employees with guns, like police officers. In America, we didn't do that. Why? Because our common law tradition didn't allow it. Don't you remember? I do, learning about when I was a boy. Everybody, when I was a boy, knew that the bobbies, they were called bobbies in London, didn't carry guns. One of the great prides of the English people, that their city police officers didn't carry weapons. That's a vestige of our common law tradition. It came to America. We exercised it with a vengeance here. Oh, there were police officers. They didn't carry guns. Do you remember, for example, the old Keystone Cop movies? Keystone Cop? They were silent movies and very popular when I was growing up, and they played them a lot on the television. They were silent pictures. The reason they played them is because the people that directed them were so clever and did so many things. That was before cartoons. They did things in those movies that later on they did in cartoons with ease. But before cartoons, they were doing the things you saw in cartoons with real people who were really good at what they did and athletic and could do a lot of crazy stuff. And the Keystone Cop movies are like that. And the Keystone Cop movies made fun of cops, of course. The cartoons came out later with cops, and if you remember, the caricature, I should say, of a policeman in the cartoons in the old days was a great big overweight Irishman who would slip up and get a free beer while he was on duty, and he had a billy club in his hand, and he was twirling it. And cops get real good at twirling billy clubs, as you know. You remember from the cartoons. And he didn't carry a gun. That hung on in America for a long time. Andy Griffith, remember, with the Andy Griffith Show and Barney Fife? If you remember, one of the chief points of that serious was that Andy never carried a gun. He was local sheriff or law enforcement or something, but he didn't carry a gun. Now, Barney carried a gun. He let Barney carry a gun, the deputy, and Barney had one bullet in his front pocket, and that's all he let him carry. Of course, it was pretty useless. If you needed to jerk a gun, you have to stop and put the bullet in it. By then, it'd be too late. But that was all vestiges of our common law tradition that police officers, government employees weren't allowed to carry guns. When I was in the mining business, we mined on land that the BLM, that's not Black Lives Matter, that's Bureau of Land Management, said they had jurisdiction over. And the agents of the BLM and the agents of the IRS, back then, wasn't that long ago, didn't carry guns. But now BLM agents and IRS agents carry guns. And you can go read the regulations. It's very precise about what kind of guns they can carry, what kind of bullets they can use in the guns, and how many grain the bullets can be of explosives, and on it goes. But they're carrying guns. They're packing heat. That's not part of our common law tradition. We should scream to high heaven, no, 1,000 times no. They didn't carry guns for decades. Where are they carrying them now? Do they want to shoot people? Or are they doing something they shouldn't be doing and they're afraid they'll get shot? They're trying to lord it over people in ways they shouldn't. Is that what it is? I'll let you decide. Our federal government buying armored tanks for sheriff's departments. You've seen it. The militarization of our police forces. Well, the other thing that goes along with that, our common law tradition never allowed people to be thrown in jail as a punishment for a crime. Oh, we'd hold people in jail. Our common law will hold people in ward, as the Bible says, awaiting trial. Sure. If you don't get bail, yeah, you're held in jail. But as punishment for a crime, no. It's not part of our common law tradition. The Quakers popularized it. Some of you have heard me tell this story. The Quakers in Pennsylvania, in America, invented what we call the penitentiary. The penitentiary. Why did they call it the penitentiary? Because they called it the place, the Quakers called it the place of penance. They said this. The Quakers said this. They said, if a man is convicted of a crime, he's a criminal. Therefore, what we need to do is not punish him. We need to give him a Bible, lock him up in a room someplace, and tell him to pray and read his Bible. And the spark of goodness that is within his breast will be inflamed, and it will kindle, and he will become a good man. You think that sounds stupid and Pollyannish? Well, as a man that's been in prison, yeah, that's stupid and Pollyannish. Not only that, it is dead contrary to what the Bible teaches about the nature of man. There is no spark of good in men. There is no spark of good in men that will ever please God. What's in man is a taint, not a spark of good, but a taint of imperfection that in time grows and grows and grows. And if the Spirit of God does not enter the body of the man or a woman, it will grow to where it will take a man or woman to places he really didn't want to go and keep him a whole lot longer than he ever wanted to stay. That all comes from in man. Like that we prayed a little bit ago, we said, do not bait us with evil. Do not, the old translation, I guess the idea, do not tempt us. The word means to bait, but that's baiting is tempting. You bait a fish, you're tempting the fish to bite the hook. And the Bible, Peter uses that analogy when it comes to temptation. Why do we pray, do not tempt us, God? Why do we ask God not to tempt us? Because God says in the Bible, this is the book of James, God tempts no man. God never tempts anybody. And then he describes what happens. You are tempted. And it is you, my friend, that have the imperfection of the taint in you that is drawn toward what is wrong. You are fundamentally tainted, sinful. You do not have that spark of good in you that will overcome that. Period. And unless God gives you the new birth of the Spirit, you will continue. I'm watching. Right now, it's hard to watch. A long-time friend of over 20 years gets sucked into temptation. I'm watching a couple. I can think of another one. They've been sucked into temptation, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to back out of it. Indeed, they can't. Why? Because they don't have the Spirit of God in them to do it. It's not going to happen. I'm watching the destruction, the headlong destruction. So what are they trying to do instead? They're trying to fix their problems. They can't fix their problems. God can fix them, but not them. God's the fix-it man. He can fix anything. I'm watching. It's hard to watch, but it is that taint in them. As Paul the Apostle says, sin dwells in your flesh. There's a taint. There's an imperfection in here, and it exacerbates. And if you ever give in just a little bit, even just a little bit, in your mind even, to temptation, it just gets bigger. It doesn't satisfy it. Oh, it cools the heat. I have a quote in the front of my the winterized version of the Bible. I want to read it to you. It's a quote. I have two quotes in the front of the winterized translation of the Bible. One of them is by a shoe cobbler from Saxony. Yeah, shoe cobbler. One of the most profound poems I've ever read. It's a short one. But the other one is less known. The one from the shoe cobbler in the 1500s, by the way. We're going back a long ways. The shoe cobbler. Profound. It's better known. His name was Hans somebody. I have trouble with those long German words, so I don't know how to say it. No sense trying. But the other poem, nobody knows who wrote it, but we do know that it was printed on the flyleaf of the first Bible ever printed in Scotland. This was on the flyleaf of the first Bible ever printed in Scotland. We're talking about temptation. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's not that long. Let me read it to you. Here it is. Speaking of the Bible, it says this: here is the spring where waters flow to quench our heat of sin. Here is the tree where truth doth grow to lead our lives therein. Here is the judge that stints the strife when men's devices fail. Here is the bread that feeds the life that death cannot assail. The tidings of salvation dear comes to our ears from hence, from here. And the fortress of our faith is here, and shield of our defense. Then be not like the swine that hath the pearl at his desire, but takes more pleasure from the trough and wallerin in the mire. Read not this book in any case, but with a single eye. Read not, but first desire God's grace to understand thereby. Pray still in faith with this respect, to bear good fruit therein, that knowledge may bring this effect, to mortify your sin. Then happy you shall be in all your life. Whatso to you befalls, yes, double happy you shall be, when God by death you calls. Now, woven through this and the warp and the woof of this brief poem is a theme. A theme. A theme is something It's from the world. It's a Latin word from the world of weaving, theme. Theme is the warp and the woof of the weave. That's what theme originally meant. If something is a theme, that means it's woven through whatever you're talking about, and there's a theme woven through here. Let's go through it again, not the whole thing, just pick out the theme. Here's the spring where waters flow to quench our heat of sin. Here is the judge that stints the strife to lead our lives therein. Be not like the swine that hath the pearl at his desire, but takes more pleasure from the trough and wallowing in the mire. Read with a single eye, it says, and pray that the knowledge that you gain from reading, thank you, Miss Brent. People say, who is that mysterious person bringing him coffee? That's Mrs. Brent.
Who is that gorgeous woman?
Yeah. You think she's gorgeous, Miss Franny?
I do. She's just, I just love that woman.
Okay, then I'm going to tell her you said that, because girls like to hear that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah, they do. They should. And of course, I like her too, as you know. But she was the, I call her Little Miss Susie Armstrong, the All-American Girl, because that was her name before she got married. Her name is still Susie, I suppose. But happy you shall be in all your life with knowledge that may bring this effect, to mortify your sin. You see the theme? How do you stint? It uses the word stint, the strife, when men's devices fail. How do you quench the sin that arises, that bobs forth unexpectedly from this taint within you? Locking a man in a room with a Bible and telling him to pray, the Quakers called it the penitentiary, the place of penance. It doesn't work, but you know we follow that still. What do we call our jails now? This is pretty new. It's a new innovation. We don't call them penitentiaries. When I was growing up, people talked about penitentiaries because that was the name that stuck. But what do we call them now? Well, we tried penitentiary. Used to mean something nice, a place of penance. But that word penitentiary has taken on an ugly connotation. So the people that want money for the criminal law industry don't call it that anymore, because you can't get money out of government, out of taxpayers, without telling them nice things and lying to them about why you want it. So what do they call it now? You tell me. What do they call jails and penitentiaries and prisons now? Here it is. Correctional facilities. Correctional facilities. They're pushing that. It's written in large letters at jails. You see, it's the same thing that the Quakers were trying to achieve. We're going to try to make better people. Jails are not here to punish people. They're here to make things better. Listen, jails are not punishment. They are destruction. Destruction of the human soul. Who really suffers when men are sent to prison? I can tell you who suffered when I was sent to prison. Little Miss Susie Armstrong suffered. That's who suffered. And 8 children that I had at home, they suffered. And multiply that by 1 million, 2 million, who's suffering in America. America jails, incarcerates is a fancy word. But they jail, put in prison more people per capita than any country in the world, including communist China and Russia. Yeah, it doesn't work, friends. It's not a correctional facility. They'll tell you that. It's not true. They say it. They hire lots of people that are there to help you get corrected. Counselors, teachers, you know what they do? They sit in their offices, smoke cigarettes, drink coffee, eat candy bars, play free cell on their computer. That's all they do. It's all a show, friends. And who makes money? The shareholders of the prison system. Well, you ain't going to instruct me about it. I've been there. Like I say, that I've seen it, Pard. I've seen it with my own eyes, like they used to say. It's not a joke. People say, oh, prison's a joke. No, it's not a joke. It's the devil himself trying to get rid of manhood, trying to halt production, trying to take away firearms from people. All these things the evil empire does. From law-abiding citizens, I might add. I have a friend, a client, recently arrested in Indiana because his wife left him and took the car. Well, he had on the car a tracking device so that if his wife broke down out in the hinterlands of southern Indiana someplace and he had to find out where she was, if she didn't understand it or couldn't tell him or was hurt, he would know where the car is. Plus, he would know where his children are. He could keep track of his family. They had that on there for him and her. If he got lost, if he got hurt, she would know where he is. Well, she got mad, took the car. He beat her to the bank accounts, left, went to a prosecutor and told the prosecutor, there's a tracking device on my car. Is it your car? Yeah, it's my car. See, both of their names were on the car. And he's been harassing me. He knows where I am all the time. He knows where I take the children. When he comes to pick the children up at the Christian school, he comes to pick them up. He's tracking. He tries to get there before me so he can get them, and on it went. So the prosecutor, of course, wanted to justify his job, and the investigator wanted to justify his job. Didn't have enough work to do it yet. Prosecuted him for harassment because he knew where his car was, because he knew where his wife was, because he knew where his children are, and she stole his children. And then they threw him in jail. I mean, quick. They grabbed him, put him in the county. If you get thrown in county, that's the ugliest jail you can be in most cases, friends, by the way. For a lot of reasons. I suppose I oughtn't to get off down on the rabbit trail too far. Prisons are not part of our common law tradition. They're founded upon an unbiblical view of the fundamental nature of man, that he has good in him. Oh, he might have some good he'll do. He'll try to fight it. But the evil taint in every person, my friends, will overcome the good without the Spirit of God. That's why our common law tradition, another reason why our common law tradition didn't permit prisons. It's called false imprisonment to common law to throw a man in prison, period. Unless you're holding him for trial, and he's got a rabbit in his blood, as they say in the Wabash Valley, and he wants to run, well, they'll not give him bail. That's lawful at common law if there's evidence that he might run. Well, prisons are against the law. The other reason I wanted to tell you, I forgot to tell you, I want to get this on the end, this is huge. To imprison somebody as punishment for a crime, according to the law of God, is unlawful. Why? Why is it unlawful at common law, among other reasons? Of course, separation from your family, destruction of the family, destruction of manhood, men in prisons, and no girls, what are you going to get? This is all very ugly stuff, friends. This is the evil empire. This is the devil himself. The devil himself runs the prisons. No question. Let me keep on with it. But why another biblical reason? Because prisons are contrary to the fundamental trust settlement of God in the Bible. Man's relationship, the relationship of God's people to him, is they are beneficiaries of a common law trust settlement of entrusted property called land. The land the Lord your God has given you, that's our relationship to him. I want you to join us for our Winter's Inn law school course. We're teaching on Christian nationalism. How does it work? What really did God intend? And what has happened in America and what has happened in other countries. Join us, and we're about halfway through, a little more than halfway through, but you can go back and listen and watch the other lectures. If you go to the website, commonlawyer.com, and in appreciation of a donation, we want you to be part of that course. And a lot of other law school courses that are there. But it's against God's covenant to jail people because the first, his trust settlement is what it is. The first covenant of that trust settlement is to do what? It was given to our grandpa and grandma, Adam and Eve. It was to be fruitful. Multiply. Okay, we got that. That's why we're all here, because our parents were multiplying. But then it says scatter over the faces of the land. False imprisonment is still actionable at common law for that reason. And at common law, prison, jail, being confined within a boundary of some kind for what is said to be a crime is against our common law. For that reason, because it's a Christian tradition, and a man's relationship to his maker is, God defines it as his position as beneficiary of God's trust settlement of land, and God wants his land occupied and taken care of according to his terms, and the Bible gives us those terms. We don't call it, friends, listen to me, we don't call it the law of the land for nothing. Our Constitution, Article 6, calls our common law the law of the land. Magna Carta calls our common law law of the land, written in Latin, lex terram, land law, because of the trust settlement of God, God entrusting land. And our position as beneficiaries, by the way, and we cannot fulfill the terms of that trust settlement the way he did it for that reason, that we would be able to do that, if he lets men throw us in jail. I mean, this is not small, friends. I don't care how bad you get. There are other ways to punish people that are more humane than jail. Let's go back to this. What is bankruptcy? Well, we talked about that. What else may Congress do? Question 116. Oh, he doesn't say much about bankruptcy. Let me talk a little more about it here. Our bankruptcy laws in America are structured biblically with the influence of the Bible. Justice Joseph Story of the United States Supreme Court, in his commentaries on the Constitution, 1838, 1838, about 40 years, well, let's see, no, well, 40, 38 plus 10, well, in the 40s, a number of decades, almost 3 or 4 decades after, well, the Constitution was ratified in 1787. No, the Constitutional Convention was 1787. The people, the militiamen of the United States, the people, ratified the Constitution 1788. The Constitution went in force in 1789. You can remember it that way. Constitutional Convention, ratification, went in force, 3 years. We as Americans should know that. Well, it went into force, just as Joseph Story said as to the bankruptcy provisions of our Constitution, that only the nations, to not have bankruptcy, for our common law to not include bankruptcy, and it's part of our common law tradition, would cause America to revert to paganism and to no longer be a part of, said Justice Joseph Story of our U.S. Supreme Court, no longer be a part of Christendom. Christendom. D-O-M. Not Christendom, D-U-M-B, and I hope you're not a part of Christendom. Most folk that claim to be Christians, I fear, are part of Christendom, because the Bible, as much as they talk about it, is something they don't know a whole lot about. The laws of nature are common law, and the laws of nature's God are Bible. As William Blackstone says, revealed religion. Was America ever a part of Christendom? Well, yeah. What's Christendom? Well, it's just a long word that developed in Europe to say, well, these nations are, the religion of this nation is obviously overwhelmingly Christian. So you got England, you got Scotland, and Ireland, and then you had, in the older days, all of the continent of Europe, Italy, Spain, France, up into the Low Countries called the Germanic Deutschland, and Denmark, and Finland, and Norway, and they all became Christian, and to not a little bit, but a lot. Well, America was, of course, we're part of that. That's the West. That's the West, not the Orthodox, not the East. The West. But then there's a subset of the West that is different from the rest of the West, and that is the English-speaking world. Matter of fact, so different as night and day because of our common law tradition. The second greatest blessing. The continent of Europe has had the first greatest blessing of mankind. What is the first greatest blessing of mankind? The Bible. Without the Bible, we would not have reliable evidence showing us exactly who Jesus Christ is. That is the evidence. This is the reliable evidence in the court of last resort, not the church. No, the book. The book. That's the first greatest blessing anybody can have. These are words, as it said here. I read the poem, and they're right. They have just observing. These are words of life and death. Life, I give you life and not death. Let me read what this fellow from Saxony said. That's in the north of Germany. This shoe cobbler. Well, no, his name's not that long. His name is Hans, S-A-C-H-S, Sachs. 16th century Saxony shoe cobbler. Here it is. The Bible teaches that we all are involved in Adam's fall. We're tainted, see, with this imperfection that will overcome us. When man beholds himself within, he feels the bite and curse of sin. When gloom, despair, and terror seize, contrite falls upon his knees. Then breaks for him the light of day, then the gospel may have sway, then sees he Christ, of God the Son, who for us all things hath done, the law fulfilled, the debt is paid, death o'ercome, the curse allayed, hell destroyed, the devil bound. We wouldn't know any of that if it wasn't for this book, you see. Grace for us with God hath found. For Christ, the Lamb, removes all sin. By trust alone in Christ, we win. That's it. And we wouldn't know any of that if it wasn't for this book, see? And that's just as Story said. He said, well, Christianity, this book lies at the foundation of our common law tradition. Just as Joseph Story of the U.S. Supreme Court is arguably the greatest proponent, fought the hardest for the establishment of our common law in the wilderness of America. He was law professor at Harvard in the early days. He told his students, if you don't go west into the Northwest Territories, that was the wild and woolly West in those days, the civil law tradition may get there first, and there will be no freedom in the Northwest Territories, the territory north and west of the Ohio River. And that is why we have, as one of our four founding documents, Declaration of 76, Articles of Confederation, Constitution of the United States. What's the fourth one? According to Congress, by official legislation. What's the fourth one? Let's see them again. Maybe the sequence will remind you. Declaration of 76, that's first. Articles of Confederation, that was second, remember? And then after the Articles of Confederation, we ratified, the militiamen of America ratified the Constitution of the United States. And then what was next? Organic, founding, fundamental documents. The next one was called the Northwest Ordinance for the governance of the territories north and west of the Ohio River. And that document was written to ensure that the common law tradition prevailed in the Northwest Territories because they were afraid it wouldn't, because Parliament had extended the boundary of Quebec from above the Great Lakes down to the Ohio River. And Quebec, in this yet today, because they're French-speaking, the Roman religion prevails, and the canon civil laws is what they want, and Parliament gave it to them, and also gave them all that territory back that they had given to Virginia and Massachusetts and Connecticut. You know, those colonies had charters that went to infinity. That's why we went to war. Probably among the greatest reasons we went to war with Britain for separation, because they violated their contract with those colonies. They reneged. They took the... And then the ugliness of it all, just to drop another footnote, the Americans had spent their treasure and blood to fight the French in the French and Indian War and run them out of North America. All the British helped, of course. They were here too. But not only did we fight our blood and treasure, but then Parliament began to tax us to pay that debt of that war. We had captured all of North America, arguably north of the Rio Grande River. We didn't even know where it was at that time, but we had the whole continent, America and Canada. Do we have an investment in capturing Canada and determining what the language of North America would be? Not only determined, Americans did that. The language of North America is not French. It is English. The religion of North America has been overwhelmingly Protestant, not Romanist. That's what that war was about, friends. America is overwhelmingly a common law tradition country, not the Code Napoleon, the code of the Roman Empire called the Code Napoleon in France. That's what it would have been. That's what it is in Quebec. There would have been no fundamental right to keep and bear arms, no fundamental right to freedom of speech, no fundamental right to remain silent, no right to trial by jury. It says right in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 that the right to trial, the inestimable worth of the right to trial by jury shall be forever observed. It says it right up in the front. That's the heart of our common law tradition, is trial by jury. If we'd have been French, we wouldn't have had that. Well, the Americans did all that. Is it any wonder that, listen to me, is it any wonder that DJ Trump is saying we want Canada to join the United States? The truth is, friends, Americans spilt their blood and their treasure to make North America a common law jurisdiction, and Canada still is, with the exception of Quebec. And people from Quebec went to the East Coast and came around. They didn't like it when America took over. They didn't get what they wanted. A lot of them took their ball and their bat and left, and they said, we'll go to the wilderness of the swamps of Louisiana where nobody can bother us, and we'll do what we want down there. And they did. And that's why Louisiana is a French code jurisdiction. They're Romanist in their religious hearts, and they're comfortable with that. Now, just a little bit of history, but bankruptcy, Justice Joseph Story said that we would leave. We would be a disgrace. I think that's the way he put it. I'd have to go back. I've got a quote in my comparative law text, Excellence of the Common Law. You can get it and read all about it, but he said it would be a disgrace to the nations of Christendom if we didn't have bankruptcy. Why? Listen to me. What is Christianity all about? This is fundamental, friends. This is part of our common law tradition. This is part of bankruptcy. This is why we have bankruptcy courts. Because the center of the law of God, at the center of the redemption of God's people by his Messiah, is the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee is part of the law of God. It's every 50th year. Every 50th year. Everything revolves around the sevens. Now watch me. This is important to understand about bankruptcy law in America right now. Everything in the Old Testament, as you know, in the law of God revolves around the word Sabbath. We say Sabbath. Well, what does that mean? It's a Hebrew word. What does it mean? It means seven. It's the number seven. You say Sabbath, you're saying seven, but in different contexts, it's different sevens. In the context of the calendar, it's 7 days. You see, God established that 7-day cycle right up front, right in the beginning of the Bible. 7 days of creation. In the evening and the morning constitute, it says this right in the Hebrew text, not day one. It doesn't say day one. No. It says 1 day. The Hebrew word is echad. It's not ordinal, it's cardinal. It means oneness. Here's the limit of a day. It says that right in the Bible. You know, day one, then it talks about day two. Then it goes to the ordinal, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. But that first day, he doesn't use the ordinal word that means first. There's a word in Hebrew that means first. It's, by the way, the Bible is so perfect in this literary form. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, right? Oh, that word there, translated beginning, is the ordinal word meaning first in line. Rosh, first in line. And it's put in different context. It's used to speak in the law of God of the first fruits, first yield. That's the fundamental use of the word. Well, that's ordinal. That means first in line, but that's not the word that God uses when he's describing for the first time what a day is. Echad. Not day one, but 1 day. Very important. This is Brent. Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com. www.commonlawyer.com. Coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash, the River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.